kiddos, it's Miss Casey. Orphan Train by Christina Baker Kline, the Young Readers Edition, Orphan Train Girl, Chapter 6. Molly, Spruce Harbor, Maine, present day. Molly is starting to figure out that the cleaning out the attic actually means taking things out of boxes, looking at them for a few minutes, and putting them back where they were. After a week of going through Vivian's stuff, the pile of things to throw out or give away is tiny. A short stack of musty books, a few sheets and pillowcases, yellow with time. "I don't think I'm helping you much," she tells Vivian one afternoon in the attic. "Well, maybe not," says Vivian, "but I'm helping you, aren't I?" Molly twitches inside and clamps her mouth shut. Does that mean Vivian knows about the stolen book? That Molly has to do her hours to stay at Ralph and Dinah's? "With your service project," Vivian adds, looking at Molly a little strangely, as if she's wondering why Molly seems panicked. Molly sticks her head into a cedar chest and pulls out an old-fashioned brown dress with pearl buttons down the front. The kind of thing Molly thinks that you might see on an American Girl doll. Not that Molly ever had one, but she's seen the catalogs. Next to the dress is a crumpled turquoise cardigan, embroidered flowers, fraying green leaves, springing loose from their stitches. Under the sweater, Molly uncovers a green hardcover book with the words "Anne of Green Gables" stamped on the front in gold. "Hand me that," Vivian says. She takes it and opens it to an illustration of a wide-eyed girl with her red hair in two braids. "Ah, yes, I remember," she says. "I was not much older than you when I read this for the first time. A teacher gave it to me. You remember Miss Larson? Upright and do right, make all right." Molly does remember that. It was Miss Larson who'd made Vivian copy out that sentence. She can't imagine having a favorite teacher who'd assign a boring writing exercise like that, but Vivian is smiling. She leafs through the pages. "Anne talks so much, doesn't she? I was much shyer than that." She looks up. "What about you?" "Sorry, I haven't read it," Molly says. She wishes Vivian would stop talking about books. Is she hinting that she knows? Does she want Molly to confess? Well, if Vivian wants her to say something, she can just ask. Until then, Molly is keeping her mouth shut. She pulls more things out of the chest, clothes, books, knickknacks wrapped in old newspaper, and sets them on the floor. No, I mean, were you shy as a girl? What am I saying? You still are a girl, but I mean when you were younger." "Not exactly shy. I was quiet. Still am," she thinks. "Circumspect," Vivian says. Molly looks at her a little suspiciously. "What does that mean?" "Watchful," said Vivian. "Careful, reserved." That seems about right. Molly is surprised. How does this old lady know her so well? Teachers always complain that Molly is sullen, that she won't speak up in class, that she doesn't try to make friends. That's what Lori was getting at. The last time they had lunch, nobody seems to realize that she's watching and waiting, trying to decide if it's safe to speak up. Vivian closes the book. "You strike me as a reader, am I right?" Molly shrugs. This feels like a trap. At any moment, Vivian is going to spring it on her. "So what's your favorite book?" "I don't know. I don't have one." "Oh, I think you probably do. You're that type." Molly jerks upright. "What's that supposed to mean? The type to steal a book? The type to lie about it to an old lady who needs help with her attic?" But Vivian's face is not accusing, merely interested. "I can tell that you like things deeply." She leans forward and, to Molly's surprise, presses the book into her hands. "No doubt you'll find this old-fashioned sentimental even, but I want you to have it." "You're giving it to me? Why not?" Molly looks down at the book. She nearly got thrown out of her foster home for stealing a book. She's only here in this attic because she stole a book, and now Vivian just hands her one as if it's that easy. "Do I have to read it?" she mutters. "Absolutely, there will be a quiz," Vivian says with a twinkle in her eye. Despite herself, Molly smiles. "I'm terrible at quizzes." "I doubt that very much," Vivian says. "Anyway, I hope you'll like it." "Well, thank you." She holds the book to her chest before setting it beside her on the floor. Then she picks up an ancient pair of brown mittens that look like They've been gnawed on by a mouse, maybe several mice. I could get rid of these, right? Vivian takes the bedraggled mittens from Molly's hand. I think maybe I'll hang on to them, she says, which is what she says just about every time Molly asks that question. Neum, Milwaukee Road Depot, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1929. Neum slept badly on the train the night they reached Minnesota. At dawn, she was wide awake, so full of nervous energy, she could feel the blood pumping through her heart. She untied the ribbon in her hair and let it fall to her shoulders. Then she combed through it with her fingernails and pulled it back as tightly as she could. Turning, she caught Dutchie looking at her. Your hair is pretty, he said. She squinted at him to see if he was teasing. That's not what you said a few days ago. I said redheads have a hard time getting chosen. Not that I don't like it. He shrugged. Can't help what you are, can you? Neum craned her neck to see if Mrs. Scatcherd might have heard them talking, but there was no movement toward the front of the train car. Most of the other children were still asleep. Carmen snored a little, his head on Neum's lap, his little feet on Dutchie's leg. Dutchie wrapped a hand around Carmen's feet. I never said thanks. For what? For what you did at the train station. You could have told them it was all my idea, going up to the waiting room. You were just following me. I wouldn't have done that, Neum said a little indignantly. I know, but there's a lot of who would. Dutchie leaned forward a little. Listen, wherever we go, let's try to find each other. How can we? We'll probably end up in different places. That's true. And my name will be changed. Mine too, maybe, but we can try. Neum hesitated. Back at the orphanage, they said we should make a clean slate. Let go of the past. I can let go of the past, no problem. Dutchie picked up a wool blanket that had fallen to the floor and tucked it around the lump of Carmen's body. But I don't want to forget everything. Neum nodded. She felt that way too. Outside the window, she could see the 3 sets of tracks parallel to the one their train was on, and beyond them, broad, flat fields of furrowed soil. The sky was clear and blue. The train cars smelled of diaper rags and sweet and sour milk. Mrs. Scathard stood. All right, children, wake up. She clapped her hands several times. Around her, Neum heard small grunts and sighs as the children who were lucky enough to have fallen asleep opened their eyes and stretched their cramped arms and legs. Clean faces, combed hair, shirts tucked in, Miss Scathard said briskly. Big ones, please assist the little ones. Bright eyes and smiles. You will not fidget or touch your faces, and you will say what? Rebecca? Please and thank you, a child with blonde ringlets murmured sleepily. Please and thank you what? Please and thank you, ma'am. You will wait to speak until you are spoken to, and then you will say, please and thank you, ma'am. You will wait to do what, Andrew? Speak until you're spoken to, a brown-haired boy guessed. Exactly. The good citizens of Minneapolis are coming to the meeting hall today with the intention of taking one of you home, possibly more than one. So remember, girls, tie your hair ribbons neatly. Boys, button your shirts. Do everything in your power to make it easy for a new family to choose you. Is that clear? The train pulled into the station with a high-pitched squealing of brakes and a great gust of steam. Carmen was quiet, gaping at the buildings and wires and people outside the window. Neum wanted to say something to Dutchie, but she could not think what. Her hands were clammy. It was a terrible kind of anticipation, not knowing what they were walking into. They lined up the aisle, Neum with the solid weight of Carmen in her arms. Dutchie carried their bags. Quickly, children, Mrs. Scathard said, in 2 straight lines. That's good. Her tone was gentler than usual. This way. They followed her off the train and up a wide stone staircase. Mr. Curran brought up the rear. At the top of the stairs, they made their way down a corridor lit by glowing gas lamps and into the main waiting room of the station. It was not as big or as beautiful as the one in Chicago, but it was bright with large windows. People pointed and whispered. Neum wondered if they knew why the children were here, and then she spotted a printed paper attached to a column in black block letters. It read, Wanted, Homes for Orphan Children, a company of homeless children from the East, will arrive at Milwaukee Road Depot Friday, October 18th. Distribution will take place at 10 a.m. These children are of various ages and both sexes, having been thrown friendless upon the world. As if someone had turned a crank in her back, Neum shuffled forward, one foot after another. She smelled something sweet, candy apples, and she passed a vendor's cart. How strange, she thought, that she'd ended up in a place her parents and brothers and sister had never been and never would be. How strange that she was here and they were gone. She touched the Cladag cross around her neck. Ahead of Mrs. Scathard stood beside a large oak door. When the children reached her, they gathered around in a semicircle, the older girls holding babies and the younger children holding hands. Neum's stomach felt hollow and trembly. Mrs. Scathard nodded. "All right, Mr. Curran, we are ready." Mr. Curran leaned against the large door with his shoulder, pushing it open. Coffee break. Chapter 7, Molly, Spruce Harbor, Maine, present day. For the past week in Molly's social studies class, they've been studying the Wabanaki Indians. For the first time since she started at Spruce Harbor Middle School, Molly's been sort of interested. Anyway, it's better than diagramming sentences in language arts, that's for sure. Molly already knew that Wabanaki means people of the dawn land, because they lived where the first light of day touches the American continent. But Mr. Reed's been telling them some stuff she didn't know, like the fact that the Wabanaki are actually a confederacy of 5 tribes, including, oh my goodness, the Penobscot, Molly's own tribe, that live near the North Atlantic coast. Last week, they went on a field trip to the Abbey, a museum about Native American culture in Bar Harbor. Molly lingered by the Penobscot baskets made out of sweet grass and bark from birch trees and brown ash. This week, Mr. Reed is telling them about their final project. It'll be worth a third of their grade. Portaging, Mr. Reed says. Everybody remember what portaging is? Molly remembers learning about portaging at the Abbey Museum, but she doesn't raise her hand. Mr. Reed focuses on her anyway. Molly? Molly sighs but speaks up. Well, in the old days, the Wabanaki had to carry their canoes and everything they owned across land from one body of water to the next. When they came to the end of one lake or river or whatever, they had to pack up and bring it all on their backs. Mr. Reed nods. Thank you, Molly. So if you know you're going to have to portage, you think carefully about what to pack, right? You need to travel light, you take what's essential, what you can't live without, and you leave the rest behind. Molly touches her necklace. For this project, I want you to interview someone in your family, someone older, your mother or father or grandparent, someone who's lived through things you haven't, and ask them about a time they had to take a journey of some kind. Maybe it was an actual journey, maybe just a change of life, trying something new. Ask what they took with them from their old life, and what there would be warm cake. Sorry, Miss Casey. Messed up. They decided to leave behind. You'll turn the answers they give you into a report for the class. Mr. Reed starts the kids off brainstorming questions they can ask during their interviews. You can ask if they brought photo albums. Megan McDonald calls out 2 seats in front of Molly. Other kids add suggestions. Mr. Reed scribbles them all on the board. Get out your notebooks and write these down, he tells everybody. Molly pulls out a notebook and begins to write. But she doesn't raise her hand to add anything. She's too busy wondering who she's going to talk to. If her father were still alive, she'd picked him. Maybe she'd write about how he named his only daughter after Molly Molasses, a Penobscot Indian born the year before America declared its independence. She'd lived into her 90s, like Vivian. Molly thinks coming and going from Indian Island, where Molly herself was born. The Penobscots, said Molly Molasses, had powers, M'Twellen, given by the Great Spirit. People with those powers, her dad told her, could interpret what dreams meant, cure diseases, and tell hunters where to find game. It's too bad Molly didn't wind up with any of those powers herself. Maybe if she had, she wouldn't have been moved around so much from one place to another. Maybe she would have been born to a mom capable of remembering that a kid needs to be fed now and then. Maybe she could have been protected. Maybe she could have even protected her dad from that car accident. But she didn't, and her dad's not here, so she can't write about any of that. She could interview Ralph or Dinah, but she cringes at the thought. It would be like she's trying to get them to be her mom and dad or something. Ugh. So, how is Molly going to make this project work? Neum, Milwaukee Road Depot, Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1929. Minnesota. Neum stood at the back of the large windowless wood-paneled room with Carmen in her arms and Dutchie right behind her. The room was filled with rows of people sitting in chairs, murmuring and looking back at the children. Mrs. Scathard motioned to the children to follow her down the center aisle. As she led them toward a low stage at the front, the crowd quieted row by row. Surely Neum hoped someone here would want her. Maybe she'd go to live in a bright, sunny house where there would be warm cake to eat and tea with as much sugar as she wanted. But she was quaking as she made her way up the stairs to the stage, hugging Carmen tight. They lined up the heights, smallest to tallest. Though Dutchie was 3 years older than Neum, she was tall for her age, and they were only separated by one boy in the line. Mr. Curran cleared his throat and began to make a speech. He asked the crowd to remember that they would be doing a good deed, saving a child from poverty and sin and depravity. He talked about the paperwork. He said that the families watching could have a child for free, but they would have to feed and clothe that child and send him or her to school. At first, it would be a 90-day trial. If they didn't like their choice, after 90 days, they could send the child back. The girl beside Neum made a low noise like a dog's whine and slipped her hand into Neum's. The adults lined up and began to climb the stairs to the stage. Neum felt like one of the cows for sale at the market in her village in Ireland. In front of her, now, stood a young blonde woman, slight and pale. An earnest young man was beside her wearing a felt hat. The woman stepped forward. "May I?" "Excuse me?" Neum said. The woman held out her arms. She wanted Carmen. He took one look and buried his face in Neum's neck. "He's shy," Neum jiggled him, trying to get him to look up. "Hello, little boy," the woman said. "What's your name?" Carmen peeked up at her and nestled his warm, sticky cheek against Neum's neck. The crossed eyes can be fixed, don't you think?" the woman said to her husband. "I don't know, I would reckon so," he answered. The woman stroked Carmen's arm with her finger. "Sweet thing," she murmured. He picked his head up and gave her a bashful smile. She looked at her husband. "I think he's the one." "Nice lady," Neum whispered to Carmen, swallowing a lump in her throat. "She wants to be your mom, ma'am." "Ma'am?" he said, his warm breath on her face. "His name is Carmen," Neum told the people, reaching up. She pried the little boy's monkey arms from around her neck. The woman put her hand on Carmen's back, and he squirmed away from her and clung to Neum even more tightly. "No, no, no," he insisted. "Do you need a girl to help with them?" Neum blurted out. "I could." She thought wildly, trying to remember what she was good at. "I know about babies. I took care of my little sister, and I can mend clothes and cook." The woman's face filled with pity. "Oh, child," she said, "I am sorry. We can't afford two. We came here for a baby. I'm sure you'll find." Her voice trailed off. Neum pushed back tears. Carmen started to whimper. "You must go to your new man," she told him firmly, and peeled him off her neck. She would not cry. She told herself fiercely she would stay polite and neat, and she would smile and say please and thank you. The woman took Carmen awkwardly. Neum guessed that she was not used to holding a baby. She reached out and tucked the little boy's legs under his new mother's arm. "Thank you for taking care of him," the woman said. Before Neum could answer, Mrs. Scathard swooped over and herded the young couple and Carmen off the stage. Neum felt as if a piece of her heart had left with him. One by one, the children around Neum were chosen. The boy between Dutchie and Neum went off with a short, round woman who told him it was high time she had a man around the house. The girl who'd held Niam's hand went off with the stylish couple in hats. Dutchie and Niam were standing talking quietly when a man came closer. His skin was as tan and scuffed as old shoe leather. A sour-looking woman trailed behind him. The man eyed them for a minute without a word. Then he reached out and squeezed Dutchie's arm. "What are you doing?" Dutchie asked, startled. "Open your mouth." Niam could see Dutchie's hand closing into a fist, but Mr. Curran had come up behind them, so Dutchie didn't dare throw a punch. The man stuck a dirty-looking finger into Dutchie's mouth. Dutchie jerked his head away. "Ever work as a hay baler?" the man asked. Dutchie stared straight ahead. "You hear me, son?" "No." "No, you didn't hear me?" Dutchie looked at him. "Never worked as a hay baler. I don't even know what that is." "What do you think?" the man asked the woman. "He's a tough one, but he could use a kid this size. But we could use a kid this size." "I reckon he'll fall into line," she said. "We break horses. Boars aren't that different." Yikes. It was just as Dutchie predicted, Niam thought. Country people looking for free labor. They walked off with Mr. Curran without a glance at Dutchie. "Maybe it won't be that bad," she whispered. "If he lays a hand on me," Dutchie glared at the farmers retreating back, "they have to send you to school." He laughed. "And what'll happen to them if they don't? Who's even going to check?" "You'll make them send you," Niam insisted. "Hey, boys, stop your dallying," the man called, clapping his hands so loudly that everyone turned to look. Dutchie reached into his pocket and slipped a penny into Niam's hand, the one he'd used for his magic trick to make Carmen laugh. "For luck." "You need it too." "I know my fate, don't I? Looks like you're the one getting back on that train." Then he walked across the stage and down the steps, waving at Niam with a sad smile as he joined the couple who'd chosen him. Niam was alone again. All right, I read chapter 6 and 7 today, so chapter 8 next time. Have a good week, guys.